Peace, peace. We back. Welcome back to Rational Lens podcast, where logic comes into focus. And the reason why I use that moniker is because we got to get our third eye back into focus. And when we get our third eye developed, then we can decode this matrix and we can look through the lies by using logic and reasoning. That's why they don't want us to use our brain in logic and reasoning, because they know once we start using our brain the right way, then we can decode this matrix. See, using logic and reasoning go along with the natural law and principality of the universe, because everything in the universe is based on logic and reasoning. So, of course, we have to use our brain according to logic and reasoning. And this is what they're trying to stop us from doing, because they know once we get back into our spiritual self and being of using our mind with logic and reasoning that goes along with the spiritual law of the universe, then we're able to break and decode their matrix that they got us locked in, right? So welcome back to Rational Lens podcast, where logic comes into focus, right? And we're breaking down the two United States. And before I left, I was breaking down what a confederation is, and the difference between a confederation and a federal system, because we had two United States. The first United States had an organic constitution that was based on peace, right? And the government was the government was under the Article of Confederation, right? And they had a Continental Congress. And in this Continental Congress, you had each person representing a state. And those people that came to represent a state, they were the president of that state. Because remember, when we was reading about what a confederation is, it says that a sovereign union, a political union that's under a sovereign state. So each one of your states, of these 50 states, had their own president. And they meet together, right? And settle out their differences and things of that nature. So the first presidents of the United States was part of the Article of Confederation, right? And all of them were black. They were Republicans. You understand? So let's finish reading. Now I'm going to read what a federal system is, right? Because the United States corporation that was put together by these elite Moors who robbed and stole and enslaved the indigenous people, and they took land and resource from them and converted them over to this pseudo-religion that they call Christianity by using military conquest, right? They're the ones that created a federal system. Our ancestors had a confederacy. These elite Moors, they had a federal system, right? Federalism. Federalism is a mode of government that combines a general level of government, central or federal, with a regional level of subunit government, right? Provinces, states, cantons, and territories, and etc., while dividing the power of government between the two levels of government to illustrate examples of confederate countries. One of the world's oldest confederation and one recent organized are Australia and Micronesia, right? It says federalism differs from confederalism, where the central government is created subordinate to the regional states. You hear that? Federalism differs from confederalism, where the central government is created subordinate to the regional states. and is notable for its regional separation of government power. In the United States, the Article of Confederation as the general level of government of the original 13 colonies and later the Confederate States of America, and federalism also differ from the unitary state, where the regional levels is subordinate to the central federal government. I'm going to say that again. Where the regional levels is subordinate, mean under controlling power to the central federal government. So when we talk about federal system, we're talking about where these states are, these regional levels, right, are subordinate to the federal government. So these elite Moors, they came in and they brought in a federal system where these states that had a political union that was supposed to be sovereign wasn't sovereign no more. They changed that and they put these states under subordinate to a federal government. When the original United States that were put together by the founding fathers, right, who were indigenous, aboriginal, Native Americans, they had a more confederation, which was a political union where every state had their own sovereignty. And they came together and made treaties together and they lived in peace, because the first Constitution was the Great Law of Peace that was put together by the Iroquois Confederacy, and they were under the Article of Confederation, which had the Continental Congress, where a group of sovereign states came together. Remember I told you those states had their own individual sovereignty, so those states had their own president, right? It wasn't like now. We're under Confederation. And they came together in Congress and they had treaties with each other and they, ran this system together. But each one had their own, kept their own sovereignty. So let's look where the word federation comes from, right? We're going to look up the etymology meaning of the word federation. Give me 1 minute. Give me 1 minute, because this is going to make a whole bunch of sense what we just read, right? Right? It says the word federation comes from the late Latin word foederatio, meaning league together or union by agreement, which itself derives from the noun foedus, meaning covenant, lead or treaty. Therefore, the core etymological meaning of the word federation is a union formed through agreement, pact, or treaty between separate entities such as states or organizations, right? It says the pre-root word, the Latin word is foedus, right? Check this out. Because the word foedus sound like foe. What foe mean? If somebody your foe, that's your enemy, right? It says foedus is a Latin term with two primary meanings. It can refer to a treaty, especially one solemnifying the friendship and alliance between Rome and another state, or it can describe some foul, disgusting, or shameful. You hear that? So the word federation comes from the word federal, and the word federal comes from the word foedus, which means something that's described foul or disgusting or shameful. And it also means it can refer to a treaty, especially one solemnifying friendship and alliance between Rome and another state. Between Rome and another state. So the word foedus where they get the word federation or federatio, means somebody that's in alliance with Rome. What is Rome? Rome is the Roman Catholic Church, right? And we had the Spaniards, which was the black nobility bloodline, right? What was their religion? Christianity. Christianity comes from out of Roman Catholic, right? The Pope and all that, and the Jesuit, right? And it says a foedus is an alliance between Rome and another state, right? So who did Rome have their alliance with? Rome had their alliance with the Indo-Germans that came from Central Asia and came into Europe. They migrated into Europe and into India, right? That's why they were called your Indo-Europeans. You got your Europeans and you got your Indo-Europeans, or your Indo-Aryans, or your Indo-Germans, or your Indo-Europeans, you understand? And then you have your Europeans. Your Europeans were black. They were Moors. They were elite Moors of a royal bloodline. And then later on, they were attacked by these Indo-Europeans or these Indo-Germans who were the barbarians that took down the Roman Empire. So the original Roman Empire were your black nobility, dark skin, big nose, big lips, high cheekbones, and nappy hair. They created a royal bloodline. And their religion was Christianity, which we know this is where the Roman Catholic come from, the Pope. So what happened was these Indo-Europeans that came from Central Asia, who was chased out by the Huns, Attila the Hun, right? He chased them out of Central Asia and they went into Europe and they assimilated themselves with the Roman Catholic Church. So these Indo-Europeans were your Caucasians who assimilated themselves in a black Roman Christian empire. That's why they were called the black nobility. You understand? Queen Isabella, King Ferdinand, they were black. And they were Spaniards of the monarchy, right? They were royal bloodline. You understand? And during the Spanish Inquisition, they the ones that converted the Jews and the Muslims, your Moriscos, your Morenos, right? Your Sephardim Jews, they converted over into Christianity. They were your black Moors that came from Africa, North Africa, Morocco, Tripoli, Algiers, Mauritania. You understand? And they were the ones that came into Europe and ruled for 800 years. And later on during the Inquisition, they had to convert over to Christianity. They became the black conquistadors that came over here and colonized America under Spain, under England, under the Dutch, under the German, under these what they call European conquistadors, who were your black conquistadors. They were black, and they came with the black nobility. They were your elite Moors who conquered the Native Americans, who also were black. So like I said, it was black on black war going on. It was other blacks who were your elite Moors conquering your black Indians or your black Native Americans who were already here, who already had a civilization going on. They already had a government system. They already had an economy system, right? And it was under a confederation, not federal. And they already had a government under the Article of Confederation, and they had a Congress. And each state, Alabama, Chicago, New York, Jersey, all had their own presidents. And they all were black presidents. And they came together under Congress, this Congress of Confederation, and they had treaties with each other. And they had a constitution that was called the Great Law of Peace that was put together by the Iroquois Confederation, which was the Mohawk, right? The Onondaga, the Oneida, the Seneca, right? And the Tuscarora, right? And they came together and they created this Great Law of Peace, Islam, right? Way before these black elite Moors came from Europe, they already was practicing peace with each other. You understand? And then your black elite Moors came over and they robbed and stole and killed and enslaved the indigenous people and took over their land, and they created another form of America, which was based on a federal system, which was based on a rewritten constitution that George Washington put together. Because remember, George Washington was part of the bloodline of England. You understand? And he rewritten the Constitution, and they came over here with this federal system. Like I said, the federal system is an alliance of a group of states that's subordinate to a central government. You understand? And they created the corporate the corporate United States of America, which was incorporated in 1871. So you had the first America, which was under the organic constitution of the Great Law of Peace that was put together by the Iroquois Federation, these Native Americans who were black indigenous people of the land, right? They already had a government. They already had a Congress, right? But it wasn't based on federalism. It was based on confederalism, where everybody can remain sovereign. So every state had their own president, and they all got together under their own Congress and, settled it and ran this government system together. You understand? So the first Constitution was organic. It was natural under Confederation, and it was done by the Native Americans. And the second America was the Constitution put together by George Washington, who rewritten the Constitution under a federal system. That federal system is the Federal Reserve, because all the states are under the Federal Reserve power and using their fractional banking system that put people in debt and enslaved people economically. Our ancestors didn't deal like that, the Native Americans. They traded with each other natural resources that they had. You understand? And so the word federation comes from the word federatio, which comes from the word foedus, which means it can refer to a treaty, especially one solidifying friendship and alliance between Rome and the other states. And I just explained to y'all who had an alliance with Rome. The Roman Empire, which eventually became the Roman Catholic Church. Who took down the Roman Catholic Church? Your Indo-Europeans, who spread it from Central Asia into Europe and into different parts of Asia like India. You understand? And they were the ones that conquered Rome, brought down the Roman Empire, and they filled the vacuum of the Roman Empire. They had an alliance, a military alliance. That's why the federal system is based on trade and commerce and all that, but it's also based on military conquest. And they were the ones that set up the 13 colonies. Those 13 colonies was corporations under a banking system, the Federal Reserve banking system that went back to Britain, the Britain Empire, where your black elite Moors were, which later eventually assimilated themselves with these Germanic barbarians or these Indo-Germans or Indo-Aryans or Indo-Europeans who were Caucasian, you understand? And so now you had this black nobility who were using these Indo-Germans, these Caucasians, to do their robbing and stealing and conquest and enslaving for them, while they sit in the background. You understand? So I hope you understand what I'm talking about. So it says foedus is a Latin term with two primary meanings. It can refer to a treaty, especially one solidifying friendship and alliance between Rome and the state. I just explained that to y'all. Washington, D.C. is where the headquarters at for this corporation. It was, for the Native Americans, it was in Philadelphia, where they had the Article of Confederation under the Constitution of the Law of Peace, where they maintained their sovereignty and each state had their own president. You understand? And it says, or it can describe something foul, disgusting, or shameful. The term derives from the Proto-European word for trust and is the root of the word like fides, faithful. So it says the Proto-Europeans, what I told y'all, the Proto-Europeans are your German barbaric tribes who conquered the Roman Empire and filled that void. They assimilated themselves with these black nobilities, these elite Moors, and now you have these black elite Moors who are using these barbaric warrior type Caucasians to enslave and conquer and colonize the Americas. So like I told you, first it was black elite Moors, and then the white German barbaric tribes came in and assimilated themselves into the black royal bloodline. And they were also called Indo-Europeans. So you have your Europeans who were the black Moorish elite, and then you have your Indo-Europeans who were your Germanic, Indo-Aryan, blonde hair, blue eye, pale skin, aquiline features. They were barbarians, and they were under the control and dominance of the black nobility. They assimilated these barbarians into the culture, and they were using them to colonize and conquer and take over resource and land from the indigenous people under Christianity. So I hope y'all understand it. And it says Indo-European word for trust. What's that about? A trust. What is a trust? A trust is something that you hold property in. So that's why we are in a trust. This United States corporation, it created a trust to enslave the citizens of the United States corporation, which is a military-industrial complex or a military-industrial prison complex that they got the citizens locked in. And they use their labor, you know, they extract their labor from them by enslaving them and turning them into a corporation, and that corporation is put inside a trust, right? Let me read that to y'all. Right? So it says, trust in a financial context refers to a legal arrangement which assets are held and managed by trustees for benefits of designated beneficiaries, according to the rules set by a grantor. Alternatively, trust financial or trust can refer to a specific financial institution such as banking and investment companies. So when I was explaining to you, the word foedus, which the word federal comes from the word federatio, which comes from the word foedus, which means trust, right? They said it also means trust. That trust they're talking about financially, that trust is a financial context referred to a legal arrangement, which is access, right? Or access are held and managed by a trustee. Right? So they turned us into the citizens of this federal republic, which is based on admiralty law, which is military law, and trading and commerce law. They put the citizens, enslaved them under their economic system, which is being ran by the Federal Reserve Bank, right? And they use our labor, they steal our labor from us by taxing us. And they turn the citizens into corporations, and they put their labor into a trust. So that's the asset. The trust is your labor that they're using to make money off of. And they're enslaving you economically, and they're using the prison system to enslave you. So this is what a federal system, and that's what the Federal United States Corporation put together by these black Moors elite Moors that came from Europe, who were using these Germanic barbarian tribe that they formed an alliance with, they formed a federation with under Rome, the Pope, right? To conquer, colonize our ancestors and rob and steal natural resource from them. So I hope y'all understand what a federation is and a confederation is. So I'm going to be back. I'm doing these quick little clips, right? To bring all this together. So I'm going to be right back.